Hello and welcome to today's screencast on sports psychology, and we're still looking at individual differences. So we've looked at personality, attitudes, and also social facilitation. We're now concentrating on motivation. So if we look at the specification, we need to be able to define these two key terms when it comes to motivation: the intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. We also need to know the uses and effects of intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. The uses and effects essentially means the advantages and disadvantages. So why would we use intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, or why is it good, and potentially what are the disadvantages with intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So we're all aware what motivation is. We all need motivation to get us out of bed in the morning. We need motivation to go and play the sport that we play. However, we need to determine what is the difference between intrinsic motivation, extrinsic, and both the advantages and disadvantages of both types. So first of all, starting with intrinsic motivation. This is really important. Now, you have to get this correct. Okay, it's the internal drive to succeed. That is what you need. That is a description of it that is needed. It is the internal drive to succeed, and it is something. Our motivation is all about self-fulfillment and personal accomplishment. Okay, so this is, people love to run. Okay, people love to get up, they love to go outside, and they love to go for a run, and they get a real feeling of self-fulfillment when they do that. That is their motivation. They do it because of the self-fulfillment, the personal accomplishment of running a 5k race. So they'll get pride. Pride is a fantastic word to use when it comes to intrinsic motivation. They just feel proud of themselves when they've won that, or when they've ran that 5k run. So intrinsic is all about the internal drive to succeed. It comes from within, and it's all to do with personal accomplishment and self-fulfillment. Extrinsic, however, is the complete opposite to that. Okay, so extrinsic is the external drive to succeed. So this comes externally from within. So, for example, it can be tangible. So money, trophies, badges. Okay, so we love to receive money for winning a competition, a trophy for coming first place in a football competition, badges for when we have been in a swimming competition, or even if we've just done 50 lengths, we get a badge saying, well done, you've got 50 lengths. So that is the external drive to succeed. Extrinsic motivation, we enjoy that tangible materials that we're given. We also have intangible external drive to succeed as well, such as positive reinforcement via the coach. The coach saying, oh, well done there. You've done really well. And the only reason I actually play a sport is so I can get praise off people. Not because I actually want to get any self-fulfillment or personal accomplishment from it. The fact that I love to get praised by other people. So, for example, receiving a medal for a 5k run would be an example of extrinsic motivation. So, something from somewhere else other than within. Now, we need to be aware of the uses and effects of different types of motivation on participation. Participation being key, we need to be aware of how intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation can increase participation or decrease participation within sport. So, first of all, if we're talking about intrinsic motivation, so intrinsic motivation, now what is absolutely brilliant about long-term intrinsic motivation is long-term participation. Okay, so it is best for long-term participation, so it's more valuable for taking part for one's own sake and not for someone else's sake. So this is what's brilliant about intrinsic motivation. Okay, it really continues this long-term participation. You do it throughout your whole life because of the self-fulfillment, because of the personal accomplishments it gives you. You don't do it for money, you don't do it for trophies or badges, you don't do it for praise. You do it for that self-fulfillment. And this is far more valuable, taking part in sport for your own sake, other than anyone else's. Now, it's really difficult to kind of see where we get disadvantages from for intrinsic motivation. However, just so you know, this intrinsic motivation may not be enough. Okay, it may not actually be enough to continue with long-term participation. Why is this? Okay, so this could potentially be because, especially if you're a cognitive learner, you may not enjoy it, okay, due to difficulty. So the failure becomes really frustrating. Please get that down. So for a cognitive or low ability cognitive learner, failure becomes frustrating. That failure of constantly not getting something correct could really destroy your intrinsic motivation. So you do need some extrinsic motivation to persist within there, okay, to keep you going. So intrinsic motivation may not be enough, especially when failure becomes really frustrating. if we're concentrating now on extrinsic motivation. Now, extrinsic motivation, so the use of money, trophies, badges specifically, if we think of you at a young age, what sports you enjoy playing or going to or visiting, you enjoy the ones that give you certificates once you've completed something. You enjoy the ones that give you a little badge for competing in the competition or getting a trophy for finishing first place. So extrinsic motivation is best for short-term participation and getting people started in sport. Swimming badges, you get swimming certificates or badges all the time for completing. I remember getting a yellow badge when I was younger, a green badge, a red badge, and I wanted to continue getting the badges. I didn't particularly enjoy swimming, but I loved that kind of extrinsic motivation, the certificate I continued to get. And that was really good for me. And the advantage of it was short-term participation. I don't swim anymore, but at that time, I absolutely loved it. Now, the problem with extrinsic motivation is it can really undermine intrinsic motivation. Okay, so when you take away the advantages of extrinsic motivation, it can reduce intrinsic motivation. What I mean by that is extrinsic motivation, money. Let's think about this. You have played football your whole life. You've played from the age of 3 to 17, and then you did it because you enjoy it, the fulfillment you got from it, the personal accomplishment. Now a team starts to pay you £20 a match. They start to pay you for playing, okay, which is an extrinsic motivator, and you're thinking, oh, this is good. I quite like receiving this money. And then one day they turn around and they have no money left, so they can't pay you. Now, all of a sudden, once this is taken away, the money, it can really reduce your intrinsic motivation. It can really kind of say, hang about, you can't pay me. What's the point of playing? I don't really want to play anymore. So then all of a sudden, it's completely undermined the intrinsic motivation that you began with originally. And that is if you take away the extrinsic motivation. So if you look at, that should say disadvantages there, apologies. Look at the disadvantages of extrinsic motivation. It can really undermine the intrinsic motivation, which ultimately is fantastic for long-term participation. That's if you take it away. So if you take away the extrinsic motivation, such as money, then it can really undermine the intrinsic motivation. So please make sure you've got key questions on that. Please make sure you've got all this information down and get some good questions and answers for this. Thank you.